Join us every Wednesday for InFocus, a weekly talk show produced by the St. Kitts Nevis Information Service, where we provide exclusives with key persons within the government and discuss pertinent, relevant, and interesting matters that affect us all. Tune in every Wednesday, live on ZIZ Radio and streamed live on Facebook at SKNIS Media and ZIZ Online. InFocus, your government, your business.
I'm Ian Richards, welcoming you to InFocus, a weekly program that takes a closer look at what's happening within and across the government of St. Kitts and Nevis. On July 7, 1976, a bold, visionary decision was made to anchor the Eastern Caribbean dollar to the United States dollar at a fixed rate of 2.70. Through global recessions, devastating hurricanes, a transforming regional landscape, and of course, a deadly global pandemic, that single decision has been the bedrock of our economic lives here in the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union. But how did we get here? What did it take to safeguard this peg when global giants stumbled? And as we look to the next 50 years under a bold new strategic plan, how does the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank intend to navigate an increasingly complex world to ensure shared prosperity for every citizen and every resident? Joining us today is Dr. Valda Henry, Deputy Governor of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. Stay with us for InFocus for a discussion on the strength of the EC dollar at 50.
The ECCB was born out of crisis and, yes, courage. That decision created confidence where there was uncertainty and stability where there was fragility. And it has endured. 5 decades on, our currency peg holds firm. And I confirm to you this evening that our EC dollar remains strong. The backing currently approaches 99%. You should give us a round of applause for that. When you start taking these things for granted, that's when we could have a challenge. Never take our successes for granted. They must be recognized, they must be celebrated, and they must be protected. And that's why we have to say them over and over again.
Thanks for staying with us, and it is my absolute pleasure to welcome to InFocus for the very first time Dr. Valda Henry, Deputy Governor of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. Welcome to you.
Good afternoon, Ian, and to your viewers. Welcome. Thank you for having me here and for having the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank here.
All right. So, Dr. Henry, we know that there's so much going on taking place at the bank, and we want to focus on the PEG, which is as what it is commonly known. As I would have mentioned at the top, the anchoring of the EC dollar to the US dollar at a rate of 2.70. Why is it so important that the ECCB celebrates the 50th anniversary of the PEG?
Well, 50 years is a milestone, no matter what we're celebrating, whether it's our personal age or something else. And for the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union to have maintained, and Eastern Caribbean dollar to have maintained that peg for 50 years, it's one of the longest serving pegs in the world. And it represents stability, it represents resilience, it represents, growth and unity. And so it is important that we stop to recognize that. And we take it for granted because we go to sleep every night and we get up every morning and we don't give a thought that this is going to be anything more than 2.70. If we go to the bank, we purchase it at 2.7169. If we sell it at 2.67. And we take that for granted. By stopping to recognize that, we are also stopping to recognize the work that it takes to maintain it. Mm-hmm. We stop to recognize the visionaries who pushed for that peg and recognizing the impact it has had on our life. And we cannot underscore the importance of stability.
You just made an interesting point that I want to follow up on. When you buy it at the bank, it's 2.7169. When you sell it, it's 2.68. Why? Why is there a difference?
Okay, there is a difference. It's just because it's like a commission, a small commission to the banks for holding this currency, the USD dollar, and holding the US dollar because they have to hold. So it's just a small commission that the banks get.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So now the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank is responsible for the management of the EC dollar, of course. Can you give us a brief history of how the EC dollar was established?
So the EC dollar was actually established in 1965 by our predecessor, the Eastern Caribbean Currency Authority. And the goal was to give, a common currency among the Eastern Caribbean states and a financial identity. What it did at that time, it replaced the British West Indies dollar, and because before we used the pound, and so it replaced that, and that was done in 1965. And that was all towards our part of our own, statehood and recognizing our own independence, and that was what that was about. And it was not just the EC dollar, but the ECCU who shared that same currency. Barbados also shared it, as well as Trinidad.
All right, and we do have a graphic with that, and I want to touch on that question next in terms of Barbados and Trinidad. Now, the ECCA, as you mentioned, Trinidad withdrew first. That was in 1964, and in 74, Barbados withdrew as well too. What was the impact of these decisions on the currency?
Well, what it did, because they withdrew most of the time around their independence, but what it did, I think it strengthened for the 8 ECCU countries the need to stay together. And if we throw back to federation, and when Trinidad left, and the famous quote now by Prime Minister, then Eric Williams, then Prime Minister, 1 from 10,
leave
0. And so the smaller countries felt maybe a little bit vulnerable. And then you still, but what it then did was say, we needed to come together. And in unity, there is strength. And more than 50 years later, because I was 65, the ECCU countries continue to maintain that bond of unity.
The rate was 2.70. Why 2.70? Do you know what influenced that decision? Why not 2.5?
You see, at the time, on the date of that July 7th, 1976, that was the exchange rate. That was the rate. And so they agreed to that. And 2.50 would have been less beneficial to us because it would mean we would have to give more EC dollars to get to a US dollar. So it was more beneficial to us.
And the decision to peg the EC dollar to the US dollar as opposed to moving away from the British pound sterling, of course, that probably was a very controversial decision given that there were so many historical and familial links with the UK.
There was a lot of discussion. There was a lot of debate across the 8 ECCU. And one of our employees, Ms. Valencia Grant, from St. Kitts, she has been doing the research on that because she's the one in charge, curating our virtual museum. And she found some interesting stuff. And you would be surprised that the private sector, especially the private sector in St. Kitts, pushed for that move. And the key reason was because the U.S. was then and still is the major trading partner of the ECCU. And so it made sense because that way there would be less volatility. It made sense to have a fixed rate with your major trading partner. So that is why, and the governments, they listened, there were lots of consultations, lots of discussion, and the decision was taken to move from the British pound and peg to the US dollar.
Was there pushback from the UK government?
No, it was not. It was a move that came, as I said, a lot of it was driven by the private sector in our region.
Right.
And St. Kitts private sector played a key role in that.
So how would you say back then, of course, and I appreciate you were not in the position that you are today, naturally, but based on the research that you would have come across, how did the decision to peg the US dollar, the EC dollar to the US dollar, affect the economies of the region as it relates to foreign investment, businesses, as you mentioned, the private sector pushed for it, but also on a personal note, families at the time?
I think it gave greater certainty. And that certainty led to confidence and led to trust. And so pegging the EC dollar to the US dollar, we would have seen a growth in business. It would have been, there's a certainty, as I said earlier, when you get up, it is 2.7, so even if you have to send your children to school or you have to purchase something from the US, 2.7, you can plan, you can budget, you can, organize yourself personally. So that was a benefit. And for the business community, it was also a benefit, because when they made the orders for their goods, they had no fear that from the time they placed the order to when it's going to be shipped, that there was going to be a change in the exchange rate. And we take that for granted. But I will share with you a little story. About 2 years ago, Dominica has a medical school, and you have students from Africa and different places. And one of the students shared with me that their exchange rate had devalued, the Nigerian naira had been devalued. And when he came to Dominica, he came with adequate funds to fund his entire education. But because of the devaluation of the Nigerian naira, he found himself not being able, not having enough money to complete. And then so he had to do, some other ways, went to work and so on. With the EC dollar peg and that stability for 50 years, no chance of that. If it is 10,000 US for your child to do a course or a program, that's about 27,000 EC dollars, no chance that during the start to the end, that's going to change.
And also for a foreign investor as well, to you place your money, you know how much money you have to spend.
Exactly. So it has encouraged the business community. It has provided security for individuals.
Now, it's been 50 years since the peg has been established in the beginning, and you used the word several times, stability. You emphasize that word. Why?
Stability is important, especially in an economic setting, that there is certainty. And with that certainty, there is confidence. And the truth is, our financial sector depends on confidence to survive. Our political sector, confidence to survive. Education sector, confidence plays a critical role in giving people an assurance of what is and what is to come. And with that assurance, we can then take decisions for our future, the future of our children, the future of our countries. And that is critical. And that stability also helps with resilience. And in our parts, resilience is not just a word, Resilience is a living characteristic of who we are as a people. And it's not just, as I like to say, it's not just bouncing back in place, it's bouncing forward. We are impacted by all sorts of natural disasters, hurricanes, this, that, and the next, all these shocks that are taking place globally. It impacts us, however, because of that peg. We know exactly what it is. We can plan, we can budget, we can make, come up with solutions. So yes, prices have increased in the US. A lot of it is dependent on all of what's happening globally, the global political and economic issues. But we know exactly what it is. So yes, it moved from $10 US for something to now 20 US. Do you know what the impact is on you? You know that instead of getting $27, you now need to have 54. You know that. Because you know that, you can plan for it. And that cannot be underestimated.
There's some who would argue that a fluctuation exchange rate, pegging it to some other, as opposed to one currency, also additional currencies as well too. Why is that formula not good for the Eastern Caribbean? Well,
multi-pegs, I don't know if there are any multi-pegs currencies, but multi-pegs create certainty. Because, so I have a peg with, say, the US dollar. But also a peg must make also economic sense to you. So you're going to be pegged to the, let us say, the Chinese yuan. The question we ask, what is the percentage of trade between our ECCU countries and China directly? Does it make sense for us to do that? And so, because there's a cost there to maintain the peg, and we'll come to that, there's a cost to maintain the peg. So we know that for to maintain the EC dollar peg, the legislation says we must be 60% backed. What that says is that for every EC dollar circulating in the country, in our ECCU, we must have 60 US cents in reserve. We've never gone anywhere close to that. We've always been in the 95 and above. I think there's only one time we came below that 95, and that was for a very brief time, less than 3 months, and that was towards the end of the COVID era. So that's that. So that let's say we have to have that, the US. Let us say we were pegged to the yuan, and it would say we would have to have another 70, maybe 70% or another 60%. Just think of how much reserves we'd have to keep in store for that. So there's a cost. The question is, can we afford that cost? Do we have enough business and trade going on to make it worthwhile? So I don't think that I can stand to be corrected, but multi-peg currencies, very, very, if there are any, it would be like minuscule.
Right. Okay, and you just touched on my next question, actually, would be the mechanisms that are used to ensure that the stability is maintained. Now, we do have a graphic that also highlights the back end that you mentioned, and we can probably show that now, but talk to us a bit about the mechanisms and ensuring that stability.
Okay, so as I said earlier, 60%, so we must have $60.
And that's a legal requirement?
Legal requirement. We must have 60 US cents for every dollar in circulation in the ECCU. However, is ECCB and our council and our board has said our operational minimum is 80. So while we are at 60 legally, our operational is 80. We cannot go anywhere or have anything less than 80 US cents. That just provide a buffer. But we've never been there. So it's on average, it's like 99.5, last figure, 99.5%. So that means for every EC dollar, there is 99.5 US cents in reserves. And that is the mechanism we use, sorry, to a large extent, because the reserves are then managed. The reserves, our investment guidelines for the reserves are very conservative. In fact, in addition to the three key objectives for investment, which is capital preservation, liquidity, and returns, and for us it's in that order, we have constrained it further with a peg of 60%. And so because of that, it restricts the type of investments we can get into. So it means our returns, we won't get as high as the return as someone else or even the market offers. But what it also protects, we also won't lose. Even in a market that is falling, we won't lose as much as the market is losing. Why? Because we've constrained it. Capital preservation is our first priority. That whatever we invest must remain and hold its value. So that's what we do in terms of how we manage it. Here we have some external managers, but we are constrained by our kind of policies that we have in terms of how we manage it. Yeah.
And having a 99 percentage as opposed to perhaps going over, some person may ask, why 99? Why not go to 110? Or why not maintain it at 85? What would you say to them?
So again, the back-in ratio is determined to a large extent by, yes, the reserves, but also in terms of, some of the trades. And so it's not that there have been instances where
you can see some fluctuation on the screen.
There have been instances where we have been 100%. But by and large, we are in that 90%. We don't want to get to 85, although, yes, we can get to 85. Why? Because the bigger the buffer you have, from the 60 to where we stand, what does that mean? The bigger space we have to manage fluctuations and to ensure that EC peg is never compromised.
Right, and that goes back to that stability
Yes.
that you spoke about so much. All right,
Yes.
what are the biggest threats to the foreign assets that the ECCB has invested in terms of maintaining the value, and what could impact the stability of the peg?
So the biggest threats, really, because as I said, to a large extent our reserves are managed externally, is what's happening on the global market. How is it impacting the financial market? When you look at the impact of, even say that latest war we have in terms of prices on, the growth. So that is like the biggest threat that we have. How do we manage that? As I said earlier, we manage that in terms by the investment policy we have, that what it is we use to maintain that peg. Our investment decisions manage that. And the buffer that we have also helps us. So let us say in the case of, let me go back. Let us say, let me use COVID as an example. So during COVID, as you know, there were lots of, negative impact on some persons. Businesses closed, the governments had to spend a lot of money, so we saw debt increasing in our country. So while governments were on track to be 60% debt, to get down to 60% debt by 2025, that kind of went out of the window for most of the countries. Fortunately, they're coming back here. ECCB also provided support. We also have loans that we lend to government, because that's prescribed. So what that meant, it meant we also have falling markets, and when markets were falling. So the return you could get on the investment fell. And so during that period, we did not earn as much interest rate, because also the interest rates had fallen, so you get less interest rate. And so we saw a little decline in that backing ratio. But again, because of the buffer, because of the constraints, we never got to anywhere close to 80 that we have been given as our operational minimum we can be at, and certainly not that 60. So those are the things can impact it. But again, you have to be proactive to ensure that you anticipate those things and you are able to ensure. Because that is like our number one thing that we keep in mind, of course.
And of course, you mentioned geopolitics, and of course, there are rising tensions there. Some may say then it may be prudent to consider, to explore a new currency to peg the EC dollar against.
Yes, we've heard that. Persons have asked that. We've also done the analysis, and we do that all the time. So even if we are not moving the peg to another currency, these are considerations. These are things, our team in the research department explore, so that you can guide and you can advise. But notwithstanding what's happening, our major trading partner remains who? The United States. And that was what guided that decision in the first place. The conditions have not changed, and so the peg remains.
So even with new tariffs, that has not changed, it has not affected, and the projections is that it will still be, the U.S. will remain the major trading partner, even though there may be new tariffs and new political tensions?
The analysis shows that it will remain. But as I said to you, we are proactive. We are not waiting to see if it will happen. We are always looking. So what are the other options? What will lead there? And as of now, the research demonstrates and suggests that we remain pegged to the US dollar. And in fact, people should come to the panel or listen to the panel discussion, because that is going to be robustly discussed at that panel discussion on July 1st, 2026, which is just next week, Wednesday. And it will be repeated on July 7th, the actual day.
And so the panel discussion, I imagine, is part of an activities to celebrate the peg?
Yes, indeed.
Okay. Right.
Yes, indeed.
We're going to touch on that a bit. We'll come on to that, yes. But let me ask them, because of course you mentioned the fact that the ECCB supported member states, governments of course, during the COVID-19 pandemic, and it's prescribed, that is part of the mandate of the ECCB. How does the bank guard against the actions of ECCU members to destabilize the gains of successful policies such as the peg?
Well, as you know, the agreement, the ECCB agreement, shapes and frames how we operate at the ECCB. I think it's in Article 17.2, it says that for the ECCB, for the currency peg to change, all 8 countries must unanimously agree. So that is one safeguard against that happening. Yes, it's 72 safeguard happening. And okay, also, there are also limits again placed by the ECCB Agreement 1983 on how much can be lent to a government. So yes, at the end of the year, whenever profits are made, there are distributions that go to the government based on a formula that is also prescribed by law. That also determines how much you can lend. So sometimes you would have heard people say, but oh, this country's in a bad state. Why is ECCB not giving them more? Why are we not printing more money? Mm-hmm. We can't, because the legislation provides the constraint against which we operate, which safeguards the safety of the organization itself, but also the stability of our EC dollar.
And so issues within member states, such as, say, a high national debt, is that a threat to the peg?
Not quite. It would have to be, all 8 would have to be significantly way over, but that's not. You know why? Because the ECCB operates independently of our governments. Our reserves managed completely independently. And so it's the reserve portfolio and our performance are the more critical areas for us.
Right. Okay, we're going to take a break at this moment, Dr. Henry,
Yes.
and when we come back, we can discuss the importance of celebrating that peg. As you mentioned, there are a number of activities that has been planned, and so we're going to take our break as we are approaching the bottom of the hour. So we'll do that now. Stay right there, viewers and listeners. We'll be right back with more In Focus.
Every time we have an oil shock, we react and say we really have to do something about it. And then prices go down and we move on with our lives. How many times are we going to see this same bad movie over and over again? We have to change this picture. In 2008, when oil prices rose to $147, this is US, we have to do something. And of course, every time oil prices move, so does food and fertilizer and shipping. There are a range of things and airfares. It's not just oil prices. So we have to become more energy secure, which is why we are fully behind this whole push for renewable energy. At our campus, we generate most of our electricity from solar PV with battery storage. We are not asking you to do what we ourselves have not already done. As a result of that, we're saving almost $2 million a year in electricity costs. My point is, we must now drive with pace and scope to get on with our renewables. It's not easy, but it has to be done.
Welcome back to In Focus. We continue our discussion with Dr. Valda Henry, who is the Deputy Governor of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, and we're discussing the 50th anniversary of the anchoring of the of the EC dollar to the US dollar at a rate of 2.70. That's $2.70. Now, Dr. Henry, you touched on it earlier. You mentioned a panel discussion. Tell us, how is the ECCB celebrating the 50th anniversary of the peg?
Well, we are celebrating the anniversary, and we started the celebration for community outreach and education, and of course, our history. So very early, we started off with a jingle and the logo. So at the bank, the staff design, we had a competition. So there is a lovely ECCB, I don't know if you have it, a lovely 50th anniversary peg logo. We have a jingle, again, by one of our staff, and it was produced by our staff members. So, real good jingle. We also have the essay competition that went out for the secondary schools as well as the tertiary colleges. In fact, just today, we agreed upon the winners of the segment, and we will be announcing that on the night of July 1st at the panel discussion, the winners of the essay competition. Every Friday, and I want to encourage persons to do that, we have a Did You Know series on our ECCB Connects page, and tied to that is a bingo. And there are lots of lovely prizes to be won. So I want to encourage persons to participate in the bingo.
That's across the region?
That's across the region. It goes out to Mississippi Connects, and it's really very exciting. And then we have the panel discussion that's taking place on July 1st, next week Wednesday, and will be rebroadcasted on the 7th, which is the actual day. But there's something very interesting going to happen during the handover on July 9th. So, July 9th to 10th, there's the handover every year. The chairmanship of the Eastern Caribbean Central Board Bank Monetary Council changes, and it goes alphabetically. So this year, Dominica, Minister of Finance, Dr. Irving McIntyre, will replace PM Brown, Gaston Brown of Antigua as the chairperson at that handover ceremony, which is carried for July 9th. We'll be unveiling the new notes. They're not yet in circulation, but persons will see it, because we've been working on new notes that will have no images of the king. Well, it's now the king on these new notes, and we'll unveil those. But we had a first note without the image of the queen, and that was the $2 commemorative note that was launched in 2023 when we celebrated the 40th anniversary. And in 2024, this note did a hat trick. There are 3 major currency organizations that every year chooses a note of the year. The 3 organizations, differently. I don't remember the name off my head. I know the one is Currency Research. And the $2 note that features Sir Viv Richards won everyone, and that's the first banknote to have won the 3 awards in 1 year.
A clean sweep.
Clean sweep. You call that what is bold out hat trick? A clean hat trick by that $2 note. And I want to encourage persons to use the $2 note. I want to encourage you, when you go to the bank and they want to give you $2 and give you 2 coins, say, no, can I have the $2 commemorative note?
You can do that.
Because it's valid. You can ask for how your money is given to you. It is a valid legal tender across. So yes, we have that. And we're also going to be doing a docu-series, a 5-part docu-series that traces the history of that currency and the currency peg. Again, Valencia Grant is the key person behind that, and we're going, and the CRD team, headed by Shumal and Kirby, and the production element by Patrice Harris.
Right.
And you all should know Patrice. And Liz, Wayland, Marlon, Bristol, and Brentwood, Drago. I think they are the leads on pulling that out. It's going to be a fantastic series. At the panel discussion, we're going to show a 10-minute, do like a little summary of this 5 series. We have actually outsourced the production of the 5 series to a company, and I'm really just excited about it. And then there's also what we call the Spotlight on the Peg, where we do a random throughout the 8 countries, ask people what they know about the peg, and that too will be released coming up. We also did it internally with our staff, just to see what they do know about the peg. So lots of exciting things.
So that's more like a word on the street.
It's like a word on the street,
right.
Yeah.
Okay.
What we call it, Spotlight on the Peg. Yeah.
Let me come back, go back, I should say, to some things that you mentioned. First off, you mentioned the bingo. Now, sorry, some persons, when they hear that, they begin to automatically think, what can I gain? What can they gain?
Oh, we have some nice, lovely prizes that they can gain for that. We have the chargers, we have umbrellas, we have some other good stuff.
Some persons maybe feel it's money.
They may get some money too. We have some money. For the essay competition, we provided money to the student as well as to the participating school. Yeah.
Right. And in terms of the new notes now, that's breaking news. Is there anything that at all that you can
I'm not going to tell you anything about the note. Though I noticed Grenada said something about the note, but I'm not going to tell you anything. I want it to be a big surprise when it's unveiled on July 9th. I mean, persons have been asking for it. And not only that, we didn't just stay on our own and did that. We actually did in 2023 to 2024, we went out to the public and we said, tell us what you want to see on the new notes. And the feedback from the public, and I must commend the public because there was wide participation. with persons saying what they want, what they did not want. So they asked them what they wanted, but they also said what they did not want to see. And taking that into consideration, the Monetary Council made a decision, and the notes are in production. So what we will see is, what you call them, little replicas, but the notes will go out. I think the first notes, they won't go out all together. I think the first notes that will go out is the $100 notes, but you will see the unveiling of all of the notes, as well as the coins. We have also changed on the coins the face of the Queen. So the new coins will not have the face of the Queen. Again, I want you to wait until the 9th of July 9th, and it will be live streamed. So that's another, you can save the date on that, plan your evening to be home. For that, you can maybe even have a watch party with your friends and your family for the unveiling of the new notes.
Will there be a link? Because if you're talking about, and let me come back to this first. Let me go to this first. The removal of the British monarch. Yes. How significant is that?
Well, I think that is very significant. Because while yes, we still have 2 member states and member countries that are still British dependents, and that is Anguilla and Montserrat.
Yes.
But these other 6 countries are independent states. They have gotten their independence. We've had, you could say, almost like a movement from the public saying, it's time. And with the Queen passing and King Charles, I think the connection is not really fully there. And so, and so it was the impetus. It is also show, I think, is that a break a little bit from our colonial past to an embracing of our future where we determine our path. And I think that is symbolic. It's not just, it's symbolic. It's not just doing sake, it's symbolic. And I think, I hope, and we hope, it will give us as Caribbean people, ECCU members, greater pride, a greater commitment to shaping our destiny.
And we see the University of the West Indies moving away from that royal charter, aligning more so with CARICOM. Of course, CARICOM and ECCU, they're different with OACS, but still we see that movement happening within the region. And so that's something that, as you mentioned, it's time. Most persons feel like the stars are aligned now and it's time for us to claim our own destiny. And of course, there's talks about other countries becoming republics as well too.
Yes.
Moving away from that allegiance to the king, the queen, the heirs, and all of that.
Well, Dominica did it in 1978. It became a republic, so we have a president who saw that Barbados is, not part of ECCU, is like the latest country.
And Jamaica is also moving towards that as well. Right. Also, come back as well to, you mentioned the virtual museum. Now, I was very impressed, and I think the feedback that most persons gave from the virtual museum that was launched when the ECCB had their anniversary, it was very well done. And so there's that extension now that you're mentioning that's going to happen that spotlights the peg.
Yes. And so we are doing like a new room for the currency peg. And I mean, again, I don't want to give out little state secrets yet on that, but that is also going to be like, last week, yes, I saw, like a little preview of what that new room will be. And I was blown away. And I'm saying to you, if I was blown away, you are going to be blown away. Because we are actually you're going to feel that you are truly in the currency department, You'll see how the money is kept. You will see some of the equipment that is used to move the money, to pack the money, beautiful.
When will the virtual museum be launched? You have an idea?
We have sometime in maybe September.
In September?
Yeah, we have delayed it because we're trying to get everything in order. But yeah, everything in order.
Okay. And back to the currency, the new notes that you mentioned, because I was going to ask this originally before I asked the question about the monarch being removed. The design, the new designs, you mentioned Viv Richards being featured, Sir Vivian Richards actually, being featured on the $2 note. Was that a foretelling of what's to come? Do we expect to see more of our own personalities, our own icons being featured on the note?
So, Ian, you're trying to come a roundabout way for me to tell you what is there, but I'm not going to tell you, Ian. You have to be tuned in on the first. But Sir Viv wasn't the first person on the note. You notice on our $100 note,
Arthur Lewis.
we have Sir Arthur Lewis.
Right.
On our $50 note, we have our second governor of the St. Caribbean Central Bank, and our longest service governor, and that is Sir Dwight
Venner.
Venner.
Yes.
So Sir Viv is not the first person on a note. But what that $2 note is the first note without the monarch.
And remind us when that will be unveiled again?
The new notes,
yes.
It will be unveiled on July 9th, well, a replica of it, on July 9th at the handover ceremony of the change of the chairmanship between Antigua, PM Gaston Brown, and the incoming chairman of the Prime Minister of Finance, Dr. Irving McIntyre. And I just want to clarify that. The Act says that the member of the Monetary Council is the Minister of Finance of the 8 countries. However, for most of our countries, the Minister of Finance is also the Prime Minister.
Right.
So that is why the Prime Minister sits on the board, but he's not sitting on the council. So as the Prime Minister, he's sitting on the council as the Minister of Finance.
Right.
A slight distinction, but a necessary one.
Right. And the activities, are they online, do you know? That persons can go and take a look of the full roster of activities? That
Yes, it's on our website. And we are also, what we're going to do, and it's not yet on, but we are going to create on the website, a special little portal where all events of the 50th anniversary are here to make it ease of reference.
There seems to be so much pride associated. Why should the public feel proud of the EC dollar, and why should they participate in the celebrations?
Well, the EC dollar is ours, established and formed in 1965, so that means our EC dollar is 60 plus years. Again, it has maintained itself. We have been pegged to the US dollar for 50 of those 60 years. That is something to celebrate. We have maintained the stability of that dollar. That this dollar has never been devalued in its 60 plus years, not even before it was pegged. And so this is something to celebrate. We ought not to take for granted what that means. Because what that means for us is a certainty in this uncertain world. And we must stop to say, how is that certainty impacting me as an individual? As an individual, it impacts me in the sense that I know if I have to buy, and listen, right now we're talking about trade with governments and trade with businesses. Right now, the trade with individuals doing their own purchasing online is a bit greater. Some businesses, I'm sure, are closing. Before, you had to get your clothes from a particular store. Now, everybody is importing. So you see what's growing here? Look at these courier companies. I don't know if I should call their names, but you know them. They are building bigger and bigger
warehouses,
edifices. They are branching out in more and more of our ECCU countries. And so for that individual who is making their own purchase, bypassing the stores, so you could say the middleman, they know that when they go tonight to click and to order, 2.7169 is what I'll be paying on chain because of the commission, but it's 2.7 is the official rate. Again, you can plan. You can budget, and that is important. Budgeting and planning is important for financial independence. And we want our people to be financially independent. Remember, in 2023 on January 19th, when Governor, we were launching our start of our celebration for 2023, Governor issued out a call to us, first to the countries, but we have cascaded that to us as individuals. What will it take to double the size of the GDP of our countries in 10 years? And we put that down. What will it take as an individual to double our wealth, whatever our wealth is, in 10 years? And you know, one of the key components of that is that stability of that US dollar. And of course, there will be other components, and ECSC will come, I'm sure, to speak because they'll be celebrating the 25th anniversary. They now also have a new CEO who just started, I think it was 1st of June, Mr. Stuart Haynes, and they will tell us about all their great plans of ensuring that this market, and it's not only they, our governments are also putting things in place to ensure that as individuals, we have greater opportunity or greater options for investing and for, increasing our wealth. The government of Grenada launched the first retail bond, whereas before you needed $5,000 as a minimum to, 5 or 50, to purchase on the government regional RGSM stock market. Now, with that retail bond, all you needed was $500. And you could grow up by increments of 100. Government of Grenada. Government of St. Kitts is also considering it. So maybe the next bond will come from the St. Kitts government and our other governments. So again, provide great opportunities. And because our dollar is tight and secure, we're good to go.
It's a good transition to what we now know as the Big Push.
Yes.
On March 31st this year, Governor of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, Timothy Antoine, he launched the Big Push, which is a collective action for shared prosperity in the ECCU. And of course, ECU, as we established at the top, is the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union.
Yes.
Now, in this name of the key action points, I was going to talk about the name itself, the Big Push.
The Big Push?
The Big Push. But talk to us about the key action points in the Big Push, because the name itself, it gives a very interesting connotation when you think about it in your mind. The Big Push. Tell us a bit about some of the key priorities there.
So our Big Push ties back, to that January 19th call for doubling the size of our economies. And out of that Big Push, we have 7 theaters of transformation, focus areas. One is human capital and development skills, food and nutrition security, energy resilience, digital transformation, financial inclusion and wealth creation, tourism and trade logistics. These are the 7 theaters of transformation. Our governments want us to focus initially on 4 theaters of transformation. 1 being the human capital, 2 being the food and nutrition, 3 is the energy, and 4 is in terms of the logistics. And what that does, and you will hear a little more about that, because what we are trying to do, or we are hoping to do, and the council members are discussing, is what area, instead of everybody trying to do all things, how do we come together and allocate areas for different countries? So that way, instead of this, divergence of your resources, it's a focused concentration. So let us say Dominica may be energy. I'm not saying that's what it is. Dominica will focus on energy. Antigua on something else. Grenada on something else. St. Kitts on, and you're going to try to use areas, choose areas where there is a comparative advantage. Michael Porter talked about the comparative advantage of nations. What is it we are good at or best at? And focus our energies there. That way, together as a collective, we can achieve all the transformation, theaters of transformation. We focus in the different areas.
You mentioned that the 4 areas, and I'll go through them again: human capital, food and nutrition, energy, and
logistics.
Right, yeah. They were chosen. Any sense as to why those were the priorities that the heads would have chosen?
I think because they recognize that these areas, if you get through to these 4 areas, the other 3 will follow. Human capital and skills development is critical. And I'm sure you'd have seen, the report that was written by, I think it was the World Bank or the IMF on the state of our education system. A few years ago, Governor Timothy Antoine made a call in terms of skills development. And some persons, recently are saying, before our schools had a strong component of skills and technical areas. And somehow that disappeared at some point in some countries, almost completely out of the secondary schools and even the primary schools. And now there's a whole move for the TVET to bring that back. Because you need skills to move forward. When we talk about our human resources are the most important, it's not a cliche, it's truly the truth. If you don't have the human capital to do what you want and the skills and the competencies, then it staggers the growth longer. Food and nutrition security, not just food, nutrition, important. You know why? NCDs are part of the greatest cause of our death.
And that's non-communicable
Non-communicable diseases, things like diabetes, high blood pressure, and so on. A lot of that has also been traced back to the food and the nutrition, the type of food that we eat. You know, we've moved now to so much processed food, and that is maybe part of what that is. I'm not a medical doctor, but that. And so it is now focusing not just on food in and of itself, but nutritious food. But more than that, also doing our own food for our own resilience. Growing what we eat and eating what we grow. Remember during COVID, there was all this scare because we didn't know how long it was lasting. People were hoarding things. Even after COVID, and then you got the Ukraine war with the supply chain
grains, right.
disruptions and challenges that sometimes things took months to get here. And dependence. But if we have our own food resilience and healthy food, back to the basics. You know, we were really organic long before organic was fashionable. And we kind of moved away from that because they encouraged all of this thing, and now it's organic. We're going right back to what we knew before. That is it for health. Because, you know, persons talk about like this NCDs. It's not just a health issue, you know that. It is a financial and economic issue. Think that if you have diabetes or you have high blood pressure, and most persons have both, think of the cost of your medication in relation to your salary. That is money you could be using elsewhere if you didn't have it, to invest or who else, who knows. And then energy resilience, you know how important that is. So now we're moving to go to things like geothermal, St. Kitts and Nevis, you know, they're doing it, Dominica, solar, wind,
Right.
you know, so it's again to be resilient, not just on fuel. And you see what happened with this Iran, Israel, US war and that Strait of Hormuz. See the impact globally. You know, I think we didn't suffer so much. Maybe our persons had lots of story because whereas other countries, even the US had shortages. We've not done that.
Right.
But are we going to put ourselves there? We do that. And then the trade logistics. To facilitate trade among ourselves, ECCU, but also our wider CARICOM, but also movement. Because one of the things people talk about is the cost of travel within our region.
Yes.
Almost prohibitive.
And it's because of the taxes, really.
That is it too. So that's the 4 key areas of focus. And when we get that together, then digital transformation will come. Because as we are trying to become food and nutritious, focus on food and energy and all, and even human resource, human development capital, as well as skills, digital transformation is part of that new skills set that we need to develop. It will come together. Financial inclusion and wealth creation. And even in that, ECCB, soon we hope to launch, by September, the Office of Financial Conduct. Persons have been complaining. We've heard the cry that, you know, sometimes they don't understand the charges given. Charges are changed. And as the industry consolidates, persons have greater concern to ensure that, you know, the welfare is maintained. And the Office of Financial Conduct, that project has been led by our Chief Director of Policy, Dr. Tracy Polias. She was in St. Kitts just last week. She was in St. Vincent, St. Kitts the week before, St. Vincent last week. You know, in terms of promoting that. And wealth creation, I spoke about that already.
Yes, yes.
And then, of course, tourism. Tourism is a key sector for a lot of our ECC countries. But what it demonstrates, though, are we just going to be in the sea and sand tourism? Or are we going to explore the other element in terms of heritage tourism, in terms of health tourism? And so that we broaden the market. And in broadening the market, we also especially given all of this, what's happening, we increase the probability of, of resilience in that area.
Right, because with tourism, it also called for, as I have some notes said, it also called for us to transform tourism to a more resilient engine of growth. It spoke about ignoring the larger number of arrivals, but targeting more so higher value tourism, which involves diversification to integrate the environment, wellness, culture, cuisine, indigenous businesses, digitization, and of course, climate resilience infrastructure. That's very important as well.
Very, very important. And as I said about the heritage tourism puts in place the culture, it puts in place, maintaining and securing the environment and all of that embedded in that tourism.
Yes, Dr.
So
Henry.
it's not just sea and sand.
We're almost out of time, but I wanted to touch a bit more on the big push, and so we probably will have to have someone else, another representative, come back sometime if you're not available. The governor himself may take that option to talk a bit more about the big push. And you also mentioned, of course, the ECC is celebrating the 25th anniversary. Just very quickly, persons may ask, why hasn't there been more success as it comes to regional investment on the stock market? Your thoughts?
My thoughts, I think to a large extent, it's cultural. Caribbean people like to see their money in the bank. I think they have greater access to it. A lot of our businesses are family-owned businesses or held by a small group. Most of them are not willing, because to be listed on the stock exchange, you become a public company, you have a lot of, requirements, and some of them are not, maybe prepared to do so. I think that is part of the reason. And that is why at the ECCB we are, encouraging it. And if ECSC, actually from about last year or so, or maybe in the last 2 years, ECSC has really gone to try to educate and sensitize. They have taken a bigger plunge in that area. And I would think that will continue in terms of educating persons, sensitizing persons, because what we saw and getting governments, we got the governments to do the retail bond. And there was good participation. So what that says, but it was also promoted a bit, what that says is that persons are prepared and willing. We just have so more education, more sensitization, and greater opportunities for investing. Another restriction, I think, that has enabled that is that persons buy and they hold. Remember, the stock market, what makes it really move is the constant moving. But that has not been the history. Persons buy, because even retail, even institutional investors. I remember a few years ago, an institutional investor said, "We want to invest, we want to buy." But by the time we go to buy, all of the primary stock is gone, and there's very few persons willing to sell.
Right.
So persons hold it, and so. But again, as the ECSC, as it becomes more mature, and as persons become, more used to investing, then we will see more of a secondary market taking place.
And certainly we'll try to assist in that education wherever possible. As you mentioned, the anniversary is upcoming. Are there plans to expand the acceptance of the EC dollar as a medium of exchange beyond the ECCU?
Well, you know what creates acceptance is stability. So if you note, the EC dollar is accepted in a few countries. Trinidad, Tobago, Barbados. You can go with your EC dollar and it will be...
I didn't know that.
Oh, yes. You go to Barbados, as there are some stores in Barbados who will accept EC dollar as well as in Trinidad. And why? It's not that we are forcing it to happen. Because of the stability of the currency. Persons know that if I take it in Barbados, it's 1.35. It's not going to change tomorrow. So it's not, if I keep it in my till for 3 days, it's not going to move from 1.35 to 1.10, and then I've made a loss. So that is it. Trinidad is about 6 to 1. So what is happening is because of, again, the stability, and the more stable you are, the longer, you have persons who are prepared to accept the EC dollar, and that's what's happening.
I'm going to try that the next time I travel there. And finally, now the EC dollar, as we mentioned, has remained strong and stable for 50 years. What lessons should today's policymakers take from that bold decision 50 years ago? And I appreciate you can go on and on with that because it's
I'm going to be brief because our time is out.
Yes.
But you mentioned, I'm going to capitalize on all of the words you said. bold. 50 years ago, it was a bold decision. So the leaders at the time were bold and courageous. Bold and courageous in leadership is important. Another key component is unity. They were unified that this was important for our countries, our 8 member countries. And the unity is also key to our success. And I must say here that our leaders, even our current leaders, by their own actions, recognize the importance of unity. And I say it without fear of contradiction. And I've said it before, that ECCB and our Monetary Council is one of the regional bodies and decision-making body, because it is our highest governing body at the bank. And when they make a decision, that is the decision. You're not hearing tomorrow somebody else is saying, oh, they're taking a different stance from what was agreed. And that is important.
Dr. Valda Henry, we'll have to leave it right there. Deputy Governor of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much, Ian, for having us at Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. We welcome the opportunity to educate the public on what it is we do and how we preserve the stability of the EC dollar. And not just the EC dollar, because by EC dollar being stable, it means our financial system is also stable, which means we secure person's future.
All right, absolutely. Thank you so much. We'd like to thank you, viewers and listeners, for joining us for this edition of InFocus. We trust that you will join us next week at the same place at the same time for another edition. Remember, at InFocus, we discuss your government, your business. I'm Ian Richards.
Join us every Wednesday for InFocus, a weekly talk show produced by the St. Kitts Nevis Information Service, where we provide exclusives with key persons within the government and discuss pertinent, relevant, and interesting matters that affect us all. Tune in every Wednesday, live on ZIZ Radio and streamed live on Facebook at SKNIS Media and ZIZ Online. InFocus, your government, your business.